I did just read an article about Marjorie Taylor Greene getting booed very loudly, apparently, while speaking at some Supreme Court event. I guess she was speaking against trans people's, existence. I, whatever horrible thing she was doing specifically. But you'll love to hear her getting booed loudly. I'm glad that happened. I don't understand people like her's popularity, even if you're, staunchly conservative to the point of being like bigoted against trans people and racist and whatever other crazy stuff she's got going on. Even if you agree with those, like the way she conducts herself and acts is just so abhorrent, and like I can't see anyone being on her side. I've never seen a politician rise to popularity like this before. It's like something you'd see in a movie, until Trump. Did I just miss out on this? Has there always been people like this, or is this a really new phenomenon?
I think it's a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, Trump opened the door for people like that to be in power, which beforehand they weren't. And you can look at it as sort of an inevitability when you look at the Tea Party in the Republican Party and sort of just the direction, even George Bush, going from, was it Nixon to Reagan or Reagan to Nixon? It was Nixon to Reagan, right? So, that, and then we get George Bush, and then we get Trump. And so this is kind of the natural direction of the Republican Party. And I think if you remove Trump from the equation, you can just kind of look at it as them discovering where their actual base of power is, which is part of why they've become more powerful than they ever have been in like modern history through Trump and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. But something I was thinking about recently is that the reason she's on the scene is because she was supposed to be the answer to AOC. And that's why she won, I guess you could say, on her own merits, except for whatever, dark money went into her campaign initially or whatever. But I think that the reason we've seen so much momentum behind her is because they identified that, like, oh, this is a fiery, somewhat attractive, woman who can be a voice for the Republican Party, hopefully gain support amongst other women, and also just be sort of like a, eye-catching sort of firebrand for the party. And what's interesting about that is that it worked. It worked to say, this is going to be our answer to AOC. And that is interesting to me in light of people saying things like, oh, we need a left-wing Trump, we need a left-wing Joe Rogan, which sounds stupid on the face of it, and truthfully probably wouldn't work when it comes to actually being on the left because there's no dark money to go into the project. But, when it comes to politics, it seems like the idea of saying, oh, this works on the other side, well, here's our answer to that, is actually a viable strategy and maybe something that we seriously need to be looking at. What I'm trying to say is we are the Joe Rogan of the left.
Now, maybe they could just do something like Baby Yoda AI president. Like, I would vote for that. So I don't see why we couldn't get there in the next, 4 years?
Oh, also Jim Clyburn, I believe he is the Senate whip for votes. I don't know exactly how you say that. The majority whip, or I guess now he's the minority whip. But, he came out and said that Joe Biden should pardon Trump. He is advocating for Joe Biden to pardon Trump now, which, I mean, my initial thoughts is this is just exactly why these people need to be shot into the sun. And this is, in my view, Jim Clyburn is the person who we can blame for the kneecapping of the Biden agenda, because if anybody is supposed to prevent what Manchin and Sinema did, it's him. That's his job. He's the whip. He's supposed to literally whip these people in line. And when there is something that the entire Democratic Party is supposed to coalesce around, that's the majority whip's job to do, and find out what those people want and give it to them. And, now he is saying that he thinks Trump should be pardoned. I suppose the logic there is that if we pardon Trump, it makes it less likely that he is going to take on some kind of, retributive mission against all of the Democrats, where he's probably just afraid and afraid for his colleagues. But, I think it would be just the ultimate tragedy for even the amount of justice that we've seen, the small modicum of justice that we've seen, and that Trump has been convicted so far, which I guess, to be fair, he couldn't be pardoned for that, for the convictions that he has. And other than that, it doesn't really matter. What else would you pardon him for? I mean, the federal case against him with Jack Smith is being wrapped up. So I don't know what exactly Jim Clyburn is talking about. I guess the idea is that once he's out of office, they wouldn't charge him with anything. I don't know. Just, it's all stupid, and it's not like it's going to make a difference anyway. Just, yet again, a fundamental lack of ability to understand what Trump is and how he works. It doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter if you pardon him. Doesn't matter if you suck his dick. He's going to do the same thing that he was already going to do. It is what it is. It's like there's nothing that Democrats can do that is going to stop Trump from telling people that you are evil, demonic Democrats. That's just what he is doing, and you have to fight him on that level, otherwise you are going to lose.
Yeah, the peace offering there is a pretty pathetic move. It's not going to do anything at all except make him make fun of you in his tweets or whatever. So I don't know what they're really hoping to accomplish there at all. It's emblematic of their problem, right? They just don't learn with this guy. They didn't learn how to run against him after 3 fucking times, and they still don't understand how he works at all, and don't know how to deal with this guy on any level, at any angle. It's amazing.
In a way, Trump can be viewed as the ultimate vehicle, the ultimate weapon for them to be able to convince Americans to support these policies that are against their own interests, right? And like abortion is the perfect example. Like, they never actually thought that they would get as far as they've gotten with reversing abortion rights, because it's such an obvious thing that is better for people, and so they always knew that reversing that would be horrible for them. And Trump seems to be the only one who can sort of subvert that effect, where he can do that so blatantly right in front of everybody's face, appoint these people who are, essentially there to overturn Roe versus Wade. That's their job. And that's also what that trans protest at the Supreme Court is about. There's a case in the Supreme Court right now having to do with trans people. And, I'm not sure exactly what the rundown of how that's going is, but we know what this conservative court is, so it's not looking good for that. And, Trump is just able, for some reason, people like Trump enough that they trust him, even though he's doing these things that are so obviously bad for them. And it really is pretty bleak, because in 2022, people voted against the whole Dobbs situation pretty strongly. Like, Republicans suffered because of that. They should have been done a lot better in 2022 than they did. But when you got Trump on the ballot, people turn out and vote for Trump. And, unfortunately, Democrats did not have the situation set up right where they had a real answer to that. A lot of people thought Kamala and having a woman who was talking about abortion rights was going to be enough to bring out some of those people for that cause. But unfortunately, it wasn't. And that's a, major head scratcher of American history. And I hope somehow that rights itself. But it's pretty bleak. I mean, because of Trump, Republicans were essentially rewarded for reversing abortion rights, and that's just pretty dark shit.
Yeah, I think what you said about they didn't expect to get that far with abortion rights is really telling of their whole campaign, right? I think you're 100% right about that. They kind of lucked into it with the way they were able to take over the Supreme Court in kind of an unprecedented way, right? Everything kind of aligned for them. But I think I've heard the argument made that Trump never really expected to win the election, and this was just for clout, and then he got it and was kind of stuck with it, and that's one of the reasons he, was exceptionally bad at it, because he didn't even want to do it originally, And of course, once you have a taste of the power, of course, you don't give it up. And I could see that being the case. I could see it also not being the case. I don't know. But whatever the case, it's amazing what you can do when you campaign and rule through fear and ignorance, and exploiting people's fears. They'll vote for the exact opposite of their interests, and he is the perfect example of that.
With Trump, not really wanting to be the president and therefore not being very good at it, I think one big difference, and this is kind of just my intuition telling me this, but we'll sort of see how it all plays out. I feel like what's happening this time is Trump is kind of telling people, behind the scenes, I did this president thing before, and I sort of know what I did wrong now. And I think that when it comes to people like Elon Musk and RFK Jr., my instinct is kind of telling me that what he's saying to them is look, I just want somebody that I can put into these positions that I know is going to be loyal, I know is going to make me look good, so that I don't have to worry about this shit. I don't think he really wants to be president. I don't think he doesn't want to worry about the details. What he wants is to feel like he's in control and to feel like everybody is operating with his best interest in mind. And I think beyond that, he doesn't really care. And so if he can offer, the human health and human services to RFK Jr., if he can tell Elon Musk, yeah, you can create this Doge thing and do whatever you want, as long as that, if they can just do those things so that he doesn't have to think about it and he can just do whatever, then I think that appeals to him. I think, though, it's entirely possible that was the logic the first time as well. And what got in the way was Trump's ego and the fact that people's actual what they are and aren't able to do when they're in those positions is constrained by a lot of things. And that is ultimately what causes them to have to go against Trump, or sometimes they have to tell him things that he doesn't want to hear. And that's when he gets mad at them and fires them and humiliates them publicly, etc. But then he puts himself in a position where he has to figure out what to do. So, halfway through his administration, he's fired half of the people that he put in position to do certain things, and now he has to find some way to replace those people. And so, it's not necessarily his choice picks in terms of who is replacing who and who is doing these jobs now. And so it just comes down to, a question of loyalty. That's really all he cares about, is someone who's going to defer to him at all costs. But, it just comes down to a point where the agenda is almost less important. That's the most important thing. So we're seeing him put together this cabinet where, they have all of this ideological certainty about destroying the administrative state. But if any of these people get in his way, he's going to cut their head off and then just put some fucking crony in their position. And who knows what the intentions and agenda of those cronies is going to be. So we'll see how it goes. My instinct tells me that Trump doesn't want to have to worry about any of this shit, doesn't actually care about any of it, and just wants to put people in positions where they can take care of it for him. But it's hard to imagine how a personality like Elon Musk is not going to get in Trump's way and cause problems within the administration, probably within a couple months. And something interesting that Epstein said in these tapes that got released, which is a crazy sentence. It's a crazy sentence to say something interesting that Epstein said, but he said that Trump and him were in contact the entire first half of his administration up till everything happened with Epstein. And what he said was that Trump would tell him, and who knows, these are, it's likely that Epstein is just as much of a purposeful liar as Trump is. But what he said about Trump was that he would purposely turn his cabinet members on each other. It was like entertainment for him. And it's ultimately a power play. It's I guess the concept of divide and conquer, but it's sort of in this kind of grand and really performative way where he wants he wants people to not trust each other, and as soon as it seems like there's a coalition, as soon as it seems like there's momentum in a certain direction, he tries to put a wedge in that because he doesn't want anyone to operate smoothly. He doesn't want anyone to be able to accomplish the things that they're trying to accomplish, because ultimately he wants them to be completely dependent on his approval. And that's what I'm curious to see. Is that going to be what happens this time? Are all of these characters that he's putting in place, are they just going to be kind of these little puppets for him to fuck with and basically play off of each other and see, what happens? Trump seems to be as entertained by the insanity of it all as anybody. So the question for me is he going to do that again, or is he genuinely going to try to run an actual administration this time? I mean, as I say it out loud, the answer seems pretty obvious. We know Trump, and assuming that Trump is going to do anything different than what he's done before is pretty naive. The only thing that he really seems to have ideological certainty about, and therefore will allow people to operate within his administration, is on immigration. He seems to genuinely hate immigrants. He seems to genuinely believe that America should be a white nation. And so people like Stephen Miller, who's back in the administration, I think he might be one of the only people who was in the first administration who has now been reappointed. And then now he's got this guy named Tom Homan, who, wants to carry out this military extraction of immigrants from America. So that seems to be the only thing that Trump actually cares about, and everything else to him is just whatever, entertainment.
I agree with you on almost all of that there. I actually don't think he hates immigrants, really. If we're talking about Trump, ideologically speaking, I think he only cares about himself and money. I don't even really think he's a racist. I guess he's definitely a sexist and a misogynist, but it's always just about what he can exploit, He doesn't really care about anything except the money. He has no deep-seated feelings except for power and money, and that's it. So it's just whatever he can exploit, and I think he knows immigration is the one thing he can get this huge swath of people across the South, or even in the North, people in the Midwest vote that way. They're scared about stuff, They rule on fear, like we were talking about earlier, and that's something he knows he can always exploit. So I don't think it's really that he hates them. I think he just knows that's something he can always win over numbers with, and something a lot of people will even look the other way on, because there's a lot of people who secretly feel that way, or feel that, there needs to be some kind of control, you can't do it the way they're talking about, or this or that, but they're scared about what's going on still. There is a lot of concern about that, and he plays off people's fears. That's what they always do.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think it is ultimately cynical, but there just seems to be something motivated about it, where I think it has to do with his upbringing and all this weird stuff that he always says about genes and stuff. I think he genuinely believes that. And when you look at sort of his upbringing, this kind of, his dad, this kind of old school fucking, real estate mogul. I mean, this was the guy who was, he was participating in the whole practice of redlining, and they were literally being investigated by the Department of Justice because of that. And so it's I think that he just kind of has all of those things in his brain, and believes it to an extent. Does he believe it as much as he believes in, Trump? No, but he seems to, it's the one thing that he always comes back to. And yes, maybe that has to do with the fact that he views it as valuable for fear mongering, but I don't know. There just seems to be something about it that he really buys into. And if there's anywhere that you can point to and say that this is a truly hateful guy, it's there. I truly think, I would say that might even be one of his core motivating things for running for president. One of the things that made him want to run for president is he truly believes in this racist shit about immigrants, and wants to see, because there's no reason for him to say that he's going to do mass deportations. I mean, it's an what's the word? It's an escalation of what he did before. He knew he had to beat what he said before with the wall. So he just went further with it. But it's like, I mean, you know, nobody was forcing him to say that. You know what I mean? It's like I think he says that kind of thing because he believes it and he genuinely is xenophobic. And I mean, look at the whole birther thing. You know what I mean? Like it's all rooted in the same thing that you see in a lot of conservatives, which is just their rational minds reach for a real world explanation for their inherent subconscious distrust of people with brown skin. And I think if there's any motivator for Trump politically, it has to be that. One of the most fascinating things about Trump to me is his eye for flair and theatrics, and the way he sort of uses that politically. Like, you remember that stunt he did early on into the last administration where he said, like, this is all the great stuff we're doing, these are all the plans we have, and he had all these stacks of paper that were just blank paper. Like, so it's like he's just showing people stacks of paper, and he's like, yeah, that's enough. And there's another story about him, I can't quite remember where it was from, but it was like some negotiations that he was doing. Maybe Nancy Pelosi said this or something, and somebody said, like, you don't even have a plan for this, healthcare, whatever it was. You don't even have a plan. What are we talking about here? And he just, like, grabbed a piece of paper in his desk, probably a blank piece of paper, and was like, I got a plan right here. And he's just, like, waving it around. And so it's like, there's just something about that that's interesting, that it's like he doesn't, in a way, he knows that there doesn't have to be anything on the paper. You kind of just have to show a piece of paper to people and they'll be like, oh yeah, there's a plan. Or like, remember when he was taking pictures when he had COVID to show that he was still working, and he was just like signing pieces of paper with a Sharpie and shit. And it's like, you know, it's none of it's real. It's all illusion. But he knows that it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you can tell that it's an illusion. You just have to, like, show yourself doing something or holding something, and it kind of, like, subconsciously affects your mind in a way.
Theatrics and photo ops and manipulating the press has been something he's been doing and fine crafting for decades and decades, and this is the ultimate expression of it. It really seems like something that would only happen in a movie, and you'd be like, well, yeah, we've gotten close to stuff like that with people like Reagan, but thank God we'd never get there. But no, it's real life, and it's twice, non-consecutively. We got, what is it, Grover Cleveland? Is that what happened to us?
It's like concepts of a plan. Like, this motherfucker actually got elected by saying he has concepts of a plan. Like, it just doesn't get any stupider than that.
Well, I get it. Sometimes I don't have a whole plan. I like the way he's honest.
Yeah, you know, we all have something we could learn from Trump. Anthony, this podcast is going well, but how do you plan to turn it into an actual fruitful career in music and media? Yeah, I've got a plan. Look right here. I've got it right here. It's all right here. It's a plan. It exists. Don't worry about it.